This is Nick Millevoi here for Premier Guitar, and today I'm talking about the StewMac Ghost Drive. I'm a big fan of Klon style pedals. It's something I tend to keep on my pedal board for really any style of music. I always end up finding some kind of use for one of them, and there are a few that I like, and one that I've kept my eye on for quite a while now is the StewMac Ghost Drive. The thing about this pedal is that there's a really big catch, which is that you have to build it yourself. StewMac sells the Ghost Drive as a kit, so I took a look at it a while ago and I started working on my building skills. So the last time you heard from me, I was building the StewMac Sun Fuzz kit. I decided that that was a little bit easier of a place to start. I talked to some friends, looked around on the internet, and that one has a lot less parts. So I did that one first, but now that I got that one built, I decided it was time to move on to the Ghost Drive. But even with that one pedal under my belt, I am still very much coming to this as a beginner. So this video has the same premise as the Sun Fuzz video that I made, which is, can a beginner actually get one of these kits and build it and have one of these really cool pedals? So here goes. I'd like to walk through some parts of the building process for the Ghost Drive, just so you have an idea of what it's like to actually put one of these together. First, here's everything that comes in the kit. All of StewMac's kits come with well-written, easy-to-follow instructions, and they really walk you through the process that I think as a beginner made it so much easier for me to understand what I was doing and not get too far ahead of myself or feel like I was out of my element at any time. Well, a big difference between this kit and the Sun Fuzz kit is how many parts there are. The Ghost Drive has a lot more parts. So when I first opened the box, I looked at all the parts and I knew that that was going to be the case. And the first thing I did was I just opened everything up, separated all the parts from each other, and grouped everything together on my workbench. So capacitors went with capacitors, diodes went with diodes. That's all pretty easy to do because you can see the differences between them. Resistors, however, tend to look the same. I think that somebody who's built a lot of pedals might be able to tell the difference a lot quicker than I could. They do have these color-coded bands, but even with magnification, I find them kind of hard to read still. I imagine that I'll get better at that if I keep building pedals. So what I did is I took my multimeter and I just tested each one, found the value, and I laid them out in order from the smallest to the biggest on the left-hand side of my bench. And that way I always knew exactly what I was grabbing once it went time to actually build the circuit board. And this was really time consuming, and it is, it's a big step to label everything, but I think it's probably pretty essential to the process to just know exactly what you're working with, because if you were doing it as you go, I think it would get really frustrating. So that's a big step to take, but once you do that, it just made the rest of the process much easier. So with that behind me, I got into populating my circuit board and soldering everything. There's nothing necessarily harder about this than there was with the Sun Fuzz, other than that there's just more to do. There's a lot more parts, though this does have IC chips. And there's 3 of those, and those are a little bit more complicated to deal with. You have to approach those with a little bit of finesse to get them in. They're 2 parts, so you install the socket first, and then you put the chip into it. And that was a little bit different, but it's not particularly hard. But once the circuit board was built, I started wiring up the enclosure. Got my input and output jacks, my power jack, my foot switch, my LED. I even put my stickers on, and took a look over everything. As far as I can tell, it looked pretty good off the bat. I was happy with my soldering work as much as I have an opinion about that stuff, so it was time to plug it in, and here it goes. Now that I have the Ghost Drive built, I've spent some time with it at this point, and it's probably going to be my go-to for Klon style sounds on my pedal board. It does all the things I would expect one of these pedals to do, and it really sounds great. It's a really nice, responsive tone. It really just sounds like a Klon, and it's what you would expect. So I think if you get this far in the process, you're gonna have a lot of hopes that this thing is gonna sound awesome, and I know for me, I was absolutely not disappointed. I was pretty thrilled. Reflecting on the process, this pedal definitely took much longer to build than the Sunfuzz did. For comparison, the Sunfuzz only took me a couple hours to build, whereas this took me pretty much an entire day. I think for that reason, I would probably suggest that any beginner who's coming to this, start with a Sunfuzz or start with something simpler than this, just to get your feet wet and just to get a sense of how the building process goes. And if you need to troubleshoot something, it's on a much simpler circuit with less parts. So that would be easier to do. Somebody who's more experienced would probably be able to do this quicker, I would imagine. But as a beginner who is just following the instructions and just doing everything really carefully, it takes a lot of focus and concentration to get through the process. I felt better about having had some experience before I got into this one, and that made it go faster. I think if I hadn't built the Sunfuzz already, I would have felt, maybe a little bit overwhelmed at times, worrying that this just wasn't gonna work. But that doesn't mean that a total beginner couldn't build a Ghost Drive. I think it's just a more time-consuming process. You just have to know what you're getting into. And finally, the other thing is just that as a big fan of Klon pedals, building one of these myself makes me feel super legit. I feel cool that I built this one myself. So that's a little extra bonus. That might not be for everybody, but that's how I feel about it. Thanks a lot for checking out this video, and stay tuned to see what I try and build next.